Um, yeah, perfect. I got Sean trying to join here.
That's them.
Excellent, perfect. Awesome, we got a little family. That's fantastic. So, hey, welcome everyone.
Hey, John.
There we go. Hi, John. How are you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. So I'm Joe. I'm from the guy from the regiment here. So yeah. And so you guys are all from the kind of immediate family all together, if you will. Like you guys are all brothers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. So yeah, it was too cool too. I was just at a cousin of mine. It was her wedding. And oh, you guys can even see the feedback? Let me just see. Will that help? Yeah, I think so. To down country, I guess the parents, I just muted you guys. I think there was some feedback, so but I think you'll be able to unmute as needed, so just so we could hear. But it was kind of interesting. I was just actually down in Curry Barracks where Ralph was stationed during the Second World War just a couple of months ago. So it's interesting how it goes. And you guys are all in BC now, is that correct?
Just me. Yeah.
Just you? Okay.
Yeah. The rest are in Calgary. Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, there you go. So not too far away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. So anyway, I think we'll probably be good to go here.
Okay.
So we'll just are we expecting any more? Or are we all good here?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Excellent. So anyway, just a quick introduction here. So as you guys probably knew through the email threads and all that I've been having with Martin, my name is Joe MacDonald, and so I'm the regimental historian for the Loyal Edmonton Regiment. But really, I focus in on the First World War. And so when Martin shot me the email, just basically saying I had a distant relation who was Ralph Patterson, it was quite exciting because if you research the 49th Battalion, it's a name that consistently shows up. And so he was very influential. He was an original member of the battalion, and by the end of the war, he's still with the regiment. That's quite significant in and of itself, and we'll get into kind of what he went through. But I'll just put it this way: there was about 1,000 guys of that original battalion in 1915, and they all sailed overseas. They fought in the trenches in the First World War through numerous battles. And by the end of the war in 1919, there were only about 10% of that original number that was still with the unit, and Ralph was one of them. So it's quite remarkable if you think about everything you went through. And once again, we'll kind of start scratching the surface about that just in this talk, and it's just quite remarkable that you guys are family, and also some of the stuff that Martin you shared, the photographs, lots I've never seen before. And we'll go into it, kind of what they mean and who some of the people in the photos are, which is kind of neat. And also I'll be sharing some other photographs that we have in our museums holding, which feature Ralph, and you guys might have not seen this before. So anyway, and then of course, at any moment, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate. You can ask at any moment. There's also, I think, a chat box down here. So if you prefer to write in the chat box, I'll get to it right away. And without further ado, I think we'll get into it. But so far, any questions are all good here?
Oh, good. Yeah.
Excellent. So awesome. I'll just start. I'll try and share my screen here. I'm never too good with the text. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Let me just see how we go. One moment here. And then I think if I go like that. Okay, perfect. Can you guys see that there?
Yep. That's good.
Perfect. Sometimes the screen stops sharing, so if that ever is the case, just give me a shout, and then I'll get it back going again. So anyway, Martin, this is one of the photographs you had shared with me. This is Ralph right at the end of the war, and we know that because one, he's in an officer uniform. Two, just the type officer uniform with the buttons down here. This is classic for 1919. And three, we can see him with that ribbon over there. That's the military medal. And as Martin, you saw, if you look at the original military medal on the back of it, it says something specific. It says for bravery in the field. So it's not a regular service award. It's a bravery award. And as you guys can see right here, just a little rundown of the different. Oh, is someone saying something? All good. Okay. Just a little rundown. He went through a lot. As we mentioned, of the original battalion. 1,000 guys go overseas, and by the war's end, there's only 10% of that original number that are there. most of the guys that serve with the 49th Battalion in the First World War, the Edmonton Reds, they're reinforcements. They're guys who signed up with different units later on, and very few of them go through all the battles or as many battles as Ralph did. And somehow, some way, Ralph went through all this without a scratch. What we're going to do, because I'm not going to keep you here for 4 years like what Ralph did overseas, we're just going to focus in on the two of them here, the first two. And in some ways, they're the most impactful for him because this is kind of his initiation to the fighting, and especially at Courcelette, and where we're going to break down how he was actually awarded that military medal. And without further ado, let's get into it. So where does the story begin? It actually all starts in Canada. It doesn't start overseas. Well, I guess, the First World War, it started overseas. But Ralph would have seen this poster right here. This is an original poster for the 49th Battalion. It was spread across not only Edmonton, but also Northern Alberta. And you can see it says recruits wanted for the 49th Battalion Canadian Expeditionary Force. They're going to be led by a man named Lieutenant Colonel William Griesbaugh. He's going to be known as Billy Griesbaugh to everyone. It's a photograph of him taken in early 1915. And you can see the different parameters you have to fit. So you have to be between a certain age, certain height, so on and so forth. And there's different companies. He's going to join C Company. He joins in early January 1916 on the second day of recruitment, or I guess third day of recruitment, on the 6th of January in Edmonton. And so you can see here are some of the early recruits, and they're not in uniform initially. In fact, it's quite cold. You can imagine there's still snow there. Some of these guys, and we'll get into it, this guy in particular, Ronnie Arthurs, he's actually close friends with Ralph, and they keep in touch after the war. Ralph might be in this photo. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to identify him yet. Like so many of these photos, they weren't named, so it's sometimes tough picking them out, right? But you can see these early days. If you guys have been to Edmonton, a lot of the training happened in and around the legislature grounds and also down the streets of downtown Edmonton. Later on, they moved to the exhibition grounds where Northlands is. So back when Wayne Gretzky was playing with the Edmonton Oilers, it's just down the road from that. There were 2 battalions there, so each about 1,000 guys. And one was on one side, and then the 49th Battalion, Ralph included, was on the eastern side of it. So, and you can still go there today. Now it's a bit more built up, but you can see by that time in May of 1915, between January and May of 1915, it changed quite a bit. When they first signed up, they're real civilians. In fact, few of them at all had any military experience, and within only a couple months, these volunteers, and that's what they are, they're all volunteers, quickly transition into fighting men. And so you can see here they're armed. It's also important to note, and I'm sure you guys all recognize this, how they're dressed right now. Nothing about it is bulletproof or anything like that. In fact, when they first go overseas and enter the trenches, there's no steel helmet introduced. So they actually go in wearing just these soft caps. So the danger and that they're going into is immense, and also it's quite known because even by that point, the newspapers are coming back with the casualties, and so it's known that what these guys are signing up for, it's a good chance that they won't be coming home, perhaps, but it's often seen as a man's duty. And if all of a sudden your friends enlist, maybe your brother enlists as well, you're more likely to enlist in addition to that. And so that's kind of how they drove recruitment in the First World War, but that's another story. All that to be said, Ralph goes through quite intense training here in Edmonton before late May of 1915, when eventually he gets packed onto a train car, and they ship off across Canada. They make their way all the way from Edmonton across Canada to they go to Parliament Hill in Ottawa, and so he actually parades in front of the Capitol buildings over there before taking a final train to Montreal, where they board a ship called the Metagama, and they sail across the Atlantic Ocean. They get over to England. They spend a couple months in England, just further training. And then eventually in October 1915, the final call comes to go onto a boat for really the final time and make their way across to France, where they're going to be entering the trenches. By that point, they're going to a place or region that's quite infamous, especially today. I'm sure every one of you have heard the poem "In Flanders Fields." That was written in early 1915 by John McCrae, who was working for one of the field ambulances at the time of one of the big battles that shaped the fighting in Flanders. And Ralph, with the rest of the 49th Battalion, are going to be joining into that effort later on that year in October. Initially, it's just it's an initiation period. It's where they're getting bloodied for the first time. They're attached to different units. One of the guys that Ralph is actually attached to, and this is quite interesting, is Louis Riel's nephew, who was a sniper with one of the Winnipeg battalions. And so, you know, when they're in these trenches, they're mingling with these guys from across Canada. And so it's probably one of the other times that that Ralph might have encountered some troops from maybe Bob Cajun in Ontario as well, where he was born. So it's this amazing thing that when they end up in this army, that these guys are traveling so far away from Canada. Yeah, it's really where the country all comes together, because you have these different battalions, such as the 49th Edmonton Regiment, are mingling with different units from Saskatchewan, from BC, from Quebec, from Manitoba, so on and so forth. And so you really get it all together. But in particular, when they, in the spring of 1916, after they get trained up and bloodied, and they have kind of their baptism of fire, if you will, they move into the main show, and that's Ypres. And Ypres is, I think it's best summarized in this quote from a guy named William Laurie Hill, who sadly is killed only 4 days later in the first battle that Ralph is also going to take part in, this counterattack at St. Sherwood. And this was his words here: "If there's such a thing as hell on earth, this is it. It has cost thousands of lives to hold it, but Kitchener said it cost too many men for it to fall back and make it straight now. You can understand how their artillery can ply us on from 3 sides at the same time, and they sure made use of it." And so the important word that he mentions here is artillery. In the First World War, it's similar to Ukraine right now, where you have all the trenches and it's really stagnated. Big reason for this is machine gun fire. If you get out of a trench, you're going to get mown down by the machine guns. And so men are dug into these entrenchments, and they're underground. So if a machine gun or a sniper bullet can't get you down there, what can get you is artillery fire. So these shells that come over and explode, there's high explosive, there's shrapnel, which is an air burst, and there's also later on in the war gas. So it's a huge killer, and every moment it's firing down on you. What's important though for artillery to be effective, you need to have an observer, someone in a high ground position, to be able to see where they're shooting at. And when Ralph came into the Ypres salient, he was down here, so just in this sort of southeastern portion of it. And this was a significant sector, because everywhere else on this, in fact, it was a little bowl going around encircling this Belgian town of Ypres. And this was all high ground, but it was all controlled by the Germans, except in this one sector, which was Ralph's sector and the rest of the Canadian Corps. And the Germans recognized this, and they wanted to capture this. And so if you want to capture this, what you're going to do is you're going to launch one of those trench assaults. And so I think we all know with those, the classic case where those bayonet charges, and eventually on a certain time, there's going to be huge artillery bombardment, and followed by waves of infantry. And that's exactly what happens. But before we get into that, I think it's first important to mention kind of what the day-to-day life was like for Ralph. So he wouldn't spend all his time in the trenches. In fact, you can see this is a photograph from that sector. In fact, Ralph might have actually passed through this exact trench. This was literally in his sector. But he's going to spend about 7 days in the frontline trenches, and then 7 days in reserve, and then, which is just, you know, you're still under shell fire, but you're not too far back. And then eventually 7 days at rest. And so once again, if we look at this Ypres salient where Ralph was, and once again, he's just down here. You got the Canadian Red Ensign at the time, and the British units. You can see these are the rest camps back there. These are the forward artillery. That would be the Allied artillery. And then you have the front line right here, and the reserve positions would be in and around this village of Zillebeke, which still exists to this day. And so for Ralph, all around him, he's during these different trench rotations, just a day-to-day life, not even a big battle. But it's quite a precarious position, because as that other 49er quoted, German artillery from the north, from the south, from the east, and luckily not the west, but you know, you're just about surrounded. You're getting plied in from all sides, and so that's quite true. And this is another quote from him, just talking about that St. Sherwood sector that Ralph was in. Once again, that's that wood just there where my cursor is. And so it says right here, you've seen St. Sherwood mentioned in paper, I suppose. Used to be a heavy wood in peacetime, but now the trees are stripped of their limbs and cut off by shells. When these large shells strike a tree, it's shrapnel, and the explosion will chew it right off. The Huns, so the Germans, don't spare shells to clean around out from hiding batteries. And this is an actual photograph taken of no man's land in Sanctuary Wood. And so you guys can just get an appreciation. This was taken in September of 1915, so about 9 months before this quote was taken. But even now you can see there's no leaves on the trees because of the concussion of the shells. And also, if you look at all the barbed wire here, how impassable of an obstacle that would be if you wanted to try and traverse over the ground. So it's these obstacles. You can also notice, if you look closely, you can see the ground is quite pitted from different explosions. And all that to be said, he was really in the midst of that, the fighting in the First World War, if we think about the trench combat. And this is, as we know, he was spending about a week in that actual front line. So it wasn't just him going in there and coming out. He was actually living in there under all conditions, and that's just talking about the threat from artillery and so on and so forth. But he was there during quite a rainy springtime. There was even some snow at moments, and so he's exposed to a lot. So all that to be said, him and his comrades were quite a tough crew, and they had just finished one of their trench rotations here when, as I alluded to earlier, eventually the Germans launched a big attack. And so you can see they push all the way through. Just days before this attack on June 2nd, in fact, it was on May 31st, the 49th Battalion was relieved from these frontline positions. It was so bad that the Germans had overwhelmed. There was and I'll get a quote up coming soon from a guy that actually knew Ralph in the war, that the German barrage basically lasted for 7 hours. And we're going to hear a quote from a guy named Dave Barber. And Dave Barber was attached to the trench mortar, so he was embedded with the forward troops right here. And according to his quote, he looked down a trench for about 300 yards, and he didn't see another Canadian alive. And so intense was that bombardment that when the German soldiers came over, not only with their rifles and bayonets, but also with flamethrowers, there was hardly any resistance. You can see this photograph. This was taken by a German soldier who had penetrated through around this trench line right here. And you can see the Canadian defenders, and they fell trying to defend the ground, but they were overwhelmed. And it's a terrible position because, as you can see, they're actually breaking through, and they're nearly going to capture the symbolic city of Ypres, which, according to the British High Command, it had to be held at all costs. And so at that time, the 49th Battalion is going to be brought in. But just to kind of visualize that a bit more, what Ralph is coming into for his first battle, this is an aerial image of part of that, the trenches. You can see some of the trench lines there, and you can still see some of the wood. And this is taken just days later after that German bombardment. And so it totally changed everything. So it's quite intense. And Ralph at the time is further afield. And I'm just going to show you right now. When all this big bombardment is happening right here, like we were just discussing, Ralph had just vacated that area with the 49th Battalion. They'd marched through Ypres. They'd come down this road down here. And if you see where this encampment was over here, that's where they are. They're about 12 kilometers away from the front line at that moment. But when that bombardment starts that morning, according to guys who were in his same company, so the same group of about 100 guys, they had just gone to the Bass and Poppering, trying to get changed and get rid of some of that lice. And when they were coming back, they could feel this rumble. Not only could they hear this rumble, but they could feel it, and they could start to see the smoke rising. Because June, it's a very dry month, so it just became a big puff of smoke over here. And they realized that if you look here, you get the different sectors, right? So if this sector got attacked up here, it would be the British coming in. Same with this one, same with this one. But they could tell already that the sector being attacked was the Canadian sector, and so that they were going to be the ones to be called forward. And so what quickly happened, they all came back to camp, and soon enough they got the message to come forward to the line, and they're going to begin that march. As I promised, I'm just going to read this quote out right here. As I mentioned, Dave Barber, this is a guy, and we'll get into this photo later, who actually knew Ralph. And just to kind of prove it, you can actually see Ralph right here in May of 1918, and Dave stood just behind. They had trained together in Edmonton. They had sailed overseas together. They had fought in the Battle of the Somme together, where Ralph gets the military medal for bravery, and Dave is actually wounded. But anyway, it's an amazing story. But I'm just going to read this out right now. And once again, this is actually from a guy who was in the wood during that bombardment. At about 8:30 in the morning, Fritz, so the Germans, started throwing sausages. He kept that up for about 15 minutes. Then hell did break loose. For 5 hours, he never stopped. At exactly 15 minutes to 2, Mr. Fritz came over his parapet. There was hundreds of them, and all in full marching order, and each one with a long-handled shovel and a rifle. And when they reached our trench, they started shooting liquid fire, so a flamethrower. So we had no choice but to beat it for the second line, and a job we did have, for they had us almost surrounded, but we made a run for it. And so that's the words from Dave Barber. So he's still going to be in that wood, Dave Barber, and he's going to be fighting on the second line. But the 49th Battalion are called in that night to make a counterattack. And so they are brought in. They march all the way to the city Ypres. They're right down here in the corner, and they're waiting for darkness to come. And then they march down this road and work their way overland into where all that devastated ground is. Eventually what happens is on the morning of June 3rd of 1916 at 7 a.m., an order comes in. They're gonna go over the top. They were meant to go over the top 5 hours before, but unfortunately what happened, the two other battalions that were meant to support, so about 2,000 other troops who were going to go into the attack as well, it wasn't just going to be the 149th Battalion, they couldn't make it up. The communication trenches, the trenches that went from the rear area to the front line, were clogged with dead and dying men, and the 49th Battalion had to traverse overland, which was a risky maneuver, but got them there on time. Meant that they were the only ones in that jumping off position. And so eventually the order came in at 7 a.m. So in broad daylight, they're going to attack. They're going to go over the top and do a charge over that churned up ground that we're looking at with all the barbed wire. And then even worse, it's now devastated by all that artillery fire. And just to add to the danger of it all, there's numerous German machine gun crews, and you can see one just here, equipped with this Maxim machine gun that can fire up to 600 rounds per minute. And so at 7 a.m. the whistles blow, and as you can hear from the quote of this guy, was a soldier before the war and a soldier during the war with the 49th Battalion. He said, "Well, mates, it looks like bloody suicide, but it's orders," and he was killed just moments later. But this is the sort of stuff he goes into. And so when Ralph goes over the top, luckily he's one of the guys who gets through unscathed initially. But what quickly happens is, and we can just kind of see, I'm just trying to find here. Yeah, if you see Lover's Lane right here, he goes over the top just right here. And because there's all those shell holes, they quickly realize that everyone's getting gunned down by the German machine guns firing like that. And they crawl for cover. And so once they get into a shell hole, then they crawl into a trench, and then the fighting continues through the trenches. And so they actually keep it up for about 40 hours. If you want to, you're free and welcome to read this quote here. This was written by a gentleman that Ralph also knew, who's also a member of C Company, and was only 17 at the time. And the ironic thing about this all is, he actually outranked Ralph. And so the guys who are going over the top, we often talk about young soldiers, but Alf would have been leading the guys forward, and he was actually leading his section forward, and he was only 17 at the time, which is hard to imagine. But he talks about some of the experiences that he saw right in there. But it's horrific fighting, and it's prolonged fighting as well. The important thing to note here is that when you're fighting in a trench, the infantry are equipped with two things principally for a weapon. Once again, Ralph was part of the infantry. Number one, your rifle with your bayonet, and that's excellent for medium to long range. We often think about snipers with a rifle because they're accurate weapons, but the problem is you need to be able to see your enemy. And if you're fighting through a trench system, and you can imagine different zigzags and all that, it's actually not the most effective weapon, because oftentimes your enemy could be only a couple of feet away, but you can't actually see them. You can't get a clear line of sight. And if you want to get your rifle there, you're going to expose yourself, and then all of a sudden you too could be killed. So what they found was the most efficient way to fight and actually capture these trenches. You're not going to get a breakthrough, but you're going to be fighting yard by yard, and you're going to be doing that with bombs. And that was the name for grenades during the First World War. And this is where Ralph actually distinguished himself during this battle. he was equipped, and I don't know if he was especially trained beforehand or after Arthur's, who I'll get into later. He was actually the bombing officer during the battle, and was a good friend of Ralph. And these bombs would be used to try and push the line. And so if you can see where Warrington and Bidan Avenue, I'm not sure which one he was fighting down, but it would have been down one of these two trenches that he was actually pushing the Germans back and pushing the Germans back. And it was a dangerous business, because if you were engaging the Germans with your hand grenades, then you were within the range of the German hand grenades. And so there's first-hand accounts of 49th Battalion bombers, these guys who were equipped with the grenades. They're actually grabbing German stick grenades, being thrown at them and throwing them back. And so you can imagine it's a risky business. And eventually, if you get a serious wound on the front line and it's from a grenade which explodes in your hand, odds are you're not going to make it back to the field ambulance, the nearest hospital, which is just back here, and make a full recovery. Odds are it's going to be a lethal wound. So this is the sort of bravery that he's exhibiting. And somehow, some way, despite half the unit, about 400 guys being killed or wounded in this small battlefield just here, Ralph makes it through unscathed. And not only that, but if we can see in this report, they get relieved on the 5th of June, 1916. And you guys might have seen this. This is in his service file. It says he's promoted to corporal. Now, this is quite significant because, you know, if the traditional rank structure, you go from 1 to 2 to 3, and so it would be from private to lance corporal to corporal, and that could take, you know, nowadays it takes about 2.5 years. What we're seeing is this took him 8 months, and so much of this promotion, and we're going to see it time and time again throughout his service, he's rapidly promoted because he's exhibiting not only bravery but also leadership. And it's not bravery and leadership on training grounds or parade squares, but it's in battlefields just like this, where, you know, it's really the true test. And so this is where Ralph really distinguished himself in his first battle, and he's taken on this quite a fairly senior role within a fighting section. You know, eventually, once you become an officer, things change. But you know, a corporal, you're all of a sudden you're responsible for several men within your small unit. So. The next thing I want to talk about, we're going to talk about another battle, but I just want to pause and see, is there any questions about kind of what I went through, anything unclear? Because I'm just trying to set the stage for kind of the battle that he wins that medal, and trying to explain what that really means. Or is it all good? Imagine all good? Perfect. So we'll keep going. The next one, and this is one, it's a particular favorite area for me, but I also noticed that in Canada it's not very well known. The Somme was quite an iconic battle of the First World War. In fact, I think it's still to this day one of the bloodiest battles in human history. For the British, it's kind of the epitome of the First World War. So similar to how we have Vimy Ridge, the British often view the Somme as the same amount of sacrifice. What you can see here, this is the basilica in the town of Albert. It's now known as, for the troops and probably for Ralph as well, it was known as Albert. And this is one of the first things that he would have seen. The first thing he would have actually noticed about the Somme when they're marching down. They do about an 80-kilometer march in September, so 3 months after that other battle. They do trench rotations and eat before that, but eventually they're brought down here. You can get this big whiff, because since July of that year, there's been this big offensive. The British were trying to do this big push, break out to a Berlin, hopefully, and also help relieve the French further south. But you can see some of the damage and devastation from the German artillery. And so Ralph actually passed down through the square where you can see these soldiers marching. The road still exists, and this basilica still exists, and everything like that, on September the 13th of 1916. So it's quite amazing to imagine. And he would have seen this iconic image. It's mentioned in every memoir, every photograph from this town. It's you can see it up there. It's a very iconic thing. And the Somme's an iconic location because you can see here, this is the front lines. And as I mentioned, the British wanted to push out. And so all of a sudden in July of 1916, they had a mass amount of volunteers that had arrived. These men, which much like a lot of the guys in the 49th Battalion, had not been soldiers before the war. They were part of the new army. And so these guys come into the line and they're not well trained. And so the tactics are going to be very basic. Basically, this is what they're going to do. They're going to shell. So they're going to send a lot of artillery on the German front line right here. And they're going to bombard it for 7 days and 7 nights. And the idea, the logic behind it is that there's not a rat that's going to survive. But unfortunately, they underestimated the German defenses. And the Germans had actually spent 2 years before this battle in 1916, which is going to happen in 1916, digging in. There's this chalk belt that exists underneath, and it's perfect for digging deep defenses. And so as soon as that bombardment starts, that's exactly where all the Germans go. And then when the bombardment stops, they realize, okay, this is when the big attack's going to come. And so they come out and they bring up their machine guns, and it's devastating. You guys can see right here, this is no man's land. You get the British front line right here in the blue and the German in the red. And on that first day of battle, on the 1st of July, 1916, 57,000 British and Newfoundland Regiment soldiers are killed, wounded, or missing, trying to capture 13 villages, and they only capture this one right here. And so it's a huge, huge disaster. But because there was some sort of tangible success down here, the British decide to keep pushing and keep building on this, and keep using men. And so by September of that year, they're encroaching on this. It didn't change it here, but that should say second line. And so you can see it runs right there. So, and this is kind of a classic case with the First World War, that even if you get through one line, there's always another line of trenches until eventually the war ends. And it takes quite a few years to get there. Importantly here is every inch of ground that they're fighting over. And I'm sure it was quite clear with the amount of losses that they experienced right here. It's very costly. And so they're going to use men from wherever they can get it, from all parts of the empire. There's going to be Australians fighting here. There's going to be New Zealanders. There's going to be South Africans as well. But the last guys that are being called on are those Canadians, including Ralph, who are still up in Ypres, about 100 kilometers to the north. And so they once again are brought down. They march all the way through Albert, and then they're coming here in kind of mid-September. And Ralph is bivouacked on. There's a hill right over here, and he's there for about 2 days and 2 nights. And he's peering over, and he can see all the. And we have first-hand accounts of guys saying that they're looking out and they can see the big bombardment, and it's an incredible spectacle apparently. If you're sat up on this ridge line at night and you're seeing all these explosions, and you can tell exactly where the front line is. So this is the sort of stuff Ralph is seeing. What eventually happens is on the 15th of September, 1916, they're going to do another big push. And this is an important day for Ralph, and that's why I mention it. And the idea about this big push is they're going to try and not only capture this German second line, once again, it should say second line, they're actually going to push through. And so you're going to have Canadians over here trying to capture Courcelette. You're going to have Scottish over here. There's going to be New Zealanders as well, as I mentioned. There's also going to be more British troops further south. And it's going to be known as the Battle of Flares Courcelette. It's also important because it's the first time ever in history that armored vehicles, tanks, are going to be used in combat. So that's another thing that Ralph is going to see. Initially, the idea is that for the Canadians who are trying to capture this place called Courcelette, this small village over here, they're only going to be advancing to this place called Sugar Trench, and it's just before the village. Ralph and some other units that are back here near this main British base of Albert are going to be called forward if it's a success, and only if it's a success, because their idea is if we can take the village of Courcelette, that's great. It's great for propaganda. We can say the Canadians captured a village, the first village in France, but they know it's going to take more men, and so they're keeping some men back in reserve, including Ralph, who are only going to be called forward if it is a big success. So what happens on the 15th of September, we can see right now we're kind of getting more and a bit closer on the ground. That morning at about 6 a.m., the attack starts. The tanks, there's 2 tanks that go down this road. This is an old Roman road, and they're making good progress. There's heavy fighting all throughout, but they break through the first German defensive line. They break through the second, and then they get their objective of a place called Sugar Trench. And so once they get there, that's the jumping off line for the reserve units to try and capture the village of Courcelette. There's patrols that go in from the South Alberta Regiment, and they say the village of Courcelette is clear. You should send in the reserves. And so in a way, that seals the fate for the 49th Battalion, because those guys who are about 10 kilometers back, they get the order, march, head out right away. We need you. And so they come down, actually this road, which you can see right here, there's this old quarry. Ralph comes in here with the rest of the guys. There's about 600 of them, and they load up for the last time. They only have about 30 minutes to get everyone the last amount of gear they need, including everyone gets 2 hand grenades, every 4th man gets a shovel, so on and so forth, and then they head out down this road. As they come down here, they're in close contact with the battalion ahead of them. It's known as the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. They're part of the same brigade, and they're keeping a close touch because in September, it's quite dry, and so with all the shells and fire that's going on, even though it's a clear image here, it was not clear on that day, and it was very smoky. And so just to try and keep track of where everything is and where you're going, and they have never been through this ground before, and even though it looks all flat here, it was absolutely pot marked with shell holes. According to guys that were there, it was just an absolute moonscape. And just to give you an idea about how bad the shelling was, can you guys see over here, there's still some white scars on the landscape. Right beneath the soil, you have chalk. It's the same chalk from the White Cliffs of Dover. And the chalk that you're seeing here had been brought up from all those artillery explosions and when they were digging the trenches. And so still to this day, 100 years later, especially if you go in the winter to this part of France, you can see exactly where those trench lines were. So it's literally left a scar on the landscape even to this day. And that's the sort of ground that Ralph's going over. So as they're moving through here, they're eventually going to cut through near the cemetery and start making their way forward to their jumping off line. What's great, I'm going to bring it up again. The most of this presentation you're going to see, it's one I did 2 years ago, as I mentioned to Martin at the start, to the Loyal Edmonton Regiment. And so the story, and you'll actually see Ralph is especially mentioned in it, was shared to each and every member of the regiment then, which is quite cool. I imagine for you guys as part of the family. But just to get into it, I'm going to take a lot from the diary right here of a man named Dave Barber, and we had just mentioned him. He was the one who was against that brick wall, and he was just standing behind Ralph. And the reason we're going to be talking about him is because at that point in time, Ralph and Dave were actually in the same platoon. And so a platoon would traditionally be about 40 guys. In battle, you would normally have about 30. But as we can see right here, from his first-hand account, they're actually going to be down to about 14 men left in the platoon, including Dave, a guy named Chip Kerr, and also there's going to be Ralph, of course. The photo you can see here, the blue line represents the original Canadian front line. They're trying to get to that second blue line. Notice how open the ground is here. And also remember, we're talking about how dry it can be. You can really see how dry. And so any type of explosion, it's just going to launch up dust. According to a lot of first-hand accounts, you can see some clouds in the sky, but apparently it was apocalyptic that day, where you look up and it's a real haze from all the dust and the dirt. And once again, you can't see too clearly ahead of you, which actually helps them, because just on the horizon, that's where all the German defenses are. And if the German machine guns set up, they could mow them down, but it somewhat helps them, that cover, that blanket of dust. But nonetheless, the Germans recognize that reinforcements are coming through, and so they call in the artillery. And as in the words of Dave Barber here, as they're traversing this ground, and Ralph included, we came under Fritzie's curtain fire. The Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry were ahead of us. The shells were falling all around them. 2 or 3 times, a shell landed in the center of a platoon. And when the smoke and dust cleared away, we could see about 1/3 of them were missing. But the rest neither turned or hesitated. They kept straight on. Twice, a 5-pound mine landed right in the middle of our platoon. But our orders were to get up there, and everyone that was not hit had to keep going. Well, we lined up in the trench and counted them, and we had 14 men left in my platoon. And so it's just remarkable that for Ralph and the rest of the survivors to think that just in trying to get to the front line position where they're actually going to go into battle, already half the guys were out of action. And they would be in some of the shell holes trying to take cover. And there was dozens of other soldiers that were in the same situation, the wounded. But Ralph would have been up there at the spearhead with the rest of the guys. Later, what happens, you can kind of see the situation here. I'm going to break it down a little bit more. but you can see this sugar trench. And so a lot of the trenches after the war, virtually all of them were refilled. The reason they were fighting the war wasn't for the trenches to stay, but for them to go back to normal. But the topography is still there. The roads are still there. So it's neat with maps from the time you can kind of reconstruct the battle. And this map in particular here was done by Ralph's company commander at the time, Major Harstone, who was actually an American, ironically. But anyway, you can see Sugar Trench right here. This is exactly where Ralph came, about within about 100-meter radius of somewhere where my cursor is right now. And him and Dave would have been looking out on what was happening, because basically the Princess Patricias that they were following are going to take part in an assault with some other Canadian units at 6:15, and then at 8:30 p.m. that night, the 49th Battalion are going to go over the top as well. But the 49th, and Ralph included, they're going to be watching this attack go in against the German defenses here. And so I got a photo actually taken on the ground right here. And this is once again Dave's quote. And so he says, at 6:15, the Princess Patricias and the 42nd Black Watch, who are going to be on the left, went over the parapet. Old Fritzy was watching, so just on the little ridge line up here, and he had seen them start. Here and there, his machine guns began, and he started rapid fire. So all the rifles were firing, but he must have been nervous. He only stuck for a second or two, and before our boys had gone 50 yards, turned and ran, and they ran so fast that the devil could not have caught them. And so what Dave was probably watching here, and this is really important, is he was probably looking out to his left, because these guys, the 42nd Battalion Black Watch from Montreal, as they push down this road, it's called MacDonald Road. There's a German trench there, and they capture it with great success. And then they can last be seen with their kilts going against the skyline and pushing into this next objective called Fabergraben. Now, this is a trench. The Princess Patricias, on the other hand, had a bit more difficult of a maneuver. And once again, this is really important. When they go over the top, they have further to go. You can see on this aerial map up here. And so they come up against the same trench, and they take it without too much difficulty. But all of a sudden, once they're in the bottom of the valley, they have to start advancing up a hill. And once again, it's all turned up ground. And there's two machine guns where that red line is, firing down on them. And so what it does is it would be suicidal to attack head on. And so part of their force push over to the left, so down towards where that cemetery is and where the Black Watch with their kilts and the guys from Montreal are all fighting. And they help capture that Fabergraben trench. Whereas the rest of the guys push over to the right, over here, and then they start consolidating this position with some other guys who are fighting in the village. All that to be said, this part of the line is captured. This part of the German second line is captured. The whole area here is captured. But there's 250 or so yards of trench that isn't captured. And there's believed to be dozens of German soldiers there. And it makes it a very dangerous position, because at any moment they can launch a counterattack from there. In fact, there's a trench connecting another German line to this sector, so they can send reinforcements, ammunition. And if the Canadians aren't watching, they can infiltrate the system and recapture the ground, and dozens of soldiers, Canadian soldiers, would either be killed or wounded or taken prisoner. And so it's a very important position to capture. But unfortunately, Princess Patricias failed to capture that. The resistance against a whole battalion, about 600 guys, was too stiff for them to capture that. And so during that whole first day, it remains in German hands. Because of that, the 49th Battalion, which was going to go into a full-on assault, all the guys to try and capture the trench up here, they had to reconfigure what they were going to do. And so quickly, their commanding officer, that Griesbach guy, he made a new plan, a new game plan, and he's only going to send 2 companies up there, while C Company is going to move up, and Ralph included, and Dave as well, over to where this sunken road is, right next to what's now known as Courcelette British Cemetery. And Dave gives a great quote right here about in the sunken road, which was deeper at the time during the war. But it was lined with these different German dugouts, and part of their role was just to help secure the battlefield. They were to clear these dugouts, and these dugouts are quite dangerous because you don't know how many Germans are down there, if they're armed or what. And the other guys need to keep moving. The Canadians need to keep advancing. And so you're welcome to read this whole quote. But basically, Dave was left with, I think, another guy, and and the Germans kept coming out of this dugout, and they couldn't believe how many were coming out. And it's quite amazing because that sunken road is still there, and this is literally part of the ground that Ralph would have passed over. Ralph would have likely not stayed behind. He was, by that time, once again, well respected as a bomber. He had distinguished himself during the fight in the previous battle. And just based off of his record, it didn't seem like he was one to stick behind. He was going to be the spearhead. He was going to be leading the guys forward and holding down, quite frankly, the fort. There was a really important position here. And right where you see PPCLI, where it was being held, quickly C Company is going to move in to help reinforce this ground here, and in particular Ralph Patterson. It's an important position because it's a junction point. So similar to any military history where you get these different junction points with roads or so on and so forth, it's where different men and powers and sides can collide, and that's exactly what we see here. Because this is a trench which was at one point connected, what they actually do is the Princess Patricia's and Ralph with C Company, they actually establish what's known as a block. And so with sandbags or whatever they can get, they just basically make a wall in their own trench, and just to block off any infiltration, anyone trying to break through. And attached that block would have been a sentry who's looking out or more likely listening to hear is there going to be an attack or something. He would sound off the alarm and be the first man of the defense, and there would be other guys who'd been coming through to help defend as well. And the Germans over here with the red, they would have been doing the same thing. But all this did, it just made a block, so it stopped any of the movement. But the challenge was still there, and that challenge over that first night between the 15th and 16th September, it was still there. And then moving on the following morning, it was still there. And then later on, what's going to happen is the Allies want to do an attack over this ground, and it's seen right here as a very because of the precarious position right here, especially with that trench, they want this all to be cleared up before they do that. Unfortunately, right now, because of the casualties I'd already mentioned, like we looked at that quote from Dave Barber, and he had mentioned how most of his guys just trying to get to the jumping off part for the battle, they lost most of their strength. So they're actually really, really low on men, and they don't know how many Germans they're facing, but it's going to be Ralph who's going to be in charge of this bombing attack that's going to take this most critical, most important position. And I forget I think his citation mentions it, but he's only equipped with about 15 guys. One of the guys he's with, it's a guy named Chip Kerr, who him and his brother had left their homestead in Spirit River, northern Alberta, Peace River country, to come sign up. So these guys are tough guys. And Chip actually volunteers to be what's known as a first bayonet man. And so I just mentioned those blocks. And so Chip is what basically his job is to hop over that first block and go try and make contact with the enemy with a bayonet. And if you find a German, the idea is you either bayonet him or you shoot him, but hopefully you don't get killed. But obviously it's a very dangerous position to be. And so at exactly 3 p.m., Ralph would have signaled the men. He wouldn't have blown a whistle because stealth is important, but he would have signaled to Chip Kerr, it's time to go. Let's get the ball rolling. And so with that, the group of about 15 guys start off, and they're going to try and capture this trench, which about 600 guys couldn't take the previous day. And so you could imagine the sort of fear that they would be facing just in that moment, knowing what might await them. Machine guns, overwhelming enemy numbers, undoubtedly a lot of hand grenades. Perhaps it's been even more reinforced since the previous day, and it very well could be suicide. But this is what Ralph is leading, and once again, he's more or less leading from the front, just with the tactics. You got Chip Kerr at the spearhead. As you can see, once again, this is the photo of Ralph Patterson later on, using the kind of geolocating techniques. This is a photo from about 3 or 4 years ago, but this is literally where Ralph was when the attack started, and I kind of recreated where the trench once was, albeit he was underground right in the trench. But you can see it's all open ground. The reason this attack is so significant, that one, and I'll kind of spoil it, they do capture the ground, but largely it's because of not only Ralph's leadership, but especially Chip Kerr's actions, the first bayonet man, who's going to be awarded the Victoria Cross for his bravery. And the Victoria Cross is the highest award for gallantry. And so as soon as Chip Kerr hops over that block, quickly what happens is one of the German sentries hears him coming. And so when the German sentry hears him coming, the German has a hand grenade. And so he lobs the hand grenade at Chip. And Chip is in the middle of these two blocks between the Canadian block and the German block. And the hand grenade is about to blow up. And he sees it coming. So he's going to lift up his hand. And when he lifts up his hand to try and block the way, it's his left hand, he blocks the blast, but it blasts off his little pinky finger. And so when it blasts that off, he's in perhaps one of the worst situations. He's wounded already. He's in the middle of, quite frankly, no man's land. Behind him, he has all his troops, including Ralph, who are about to start hurling hand grenades trying to hit the Germans, but might hit him. Equally, you got all these other Germans alert, and you can see how many of them there are. And they're all going to start coming at Chip with different hand grenades and so on and so forth, trying to kill him as well. And so what Chip realizes is the safest place to be and the most effective place to be isn't to be in the trench anymore. It's to be above it. And so he hops over the parapet. And so Ralph would have seen, more or less this silhouette that you guys can see right now. And what Chip does is he has two hand grenades with him. So he throws them into the German trench. And then after that, with his rifle, he starts firing rounds. And so he gets 7 rounds off. And then when the rifle jams from mud, he grabs the rifle from a guy named Frank Long, who's just behind him. And then he unloads on them. And then eventually the Germans think it's a bigger force or more overwhelming force than it is. And so the Germans pull back. And so when they pull back, Chip Kerr, who now has blood dripping down his tunic from his blown off pinky, he reloads his weapon, once again, totally exposed to different machine guns and all that sort of thing, hops back in the trench and pursues the enemy. And so when he goes around the first bay of the trench, the first traverse that you can see here, he doesn't find anyone. And he goes around the second one, and at any moment there could be a machine gun waiting in ambush or something like that. But luckily, no one. And then when he gets around the third, there's a huge, big German, apparently. That's what his, when he was interviewed, that's what it said. And the German quite quickly put his hands up when he saw Chip with his bayonet. And behind that German were 62 prisoners, and including officers, dozens of machine guns, boxes of hand grenades. And so what was recognized that day was that, had it not been for Chip Kerr's efforts, capturing all the wounded, but also Ralph leading that assault, it would have been a very long-lasting garrison, more or less, of German troops. And it was right in the middle of the Canadian lines. And so what it meant, the Canadians couldn't really consolidate or hold on to their gains that they had expended so many men to capture the previous day, unless this position could be taken. And I cannot stress this enough. The Princess Patricia's, which is now seen as one of the main kind of elite battalions in the Canadian Army, they had tried to capture it with their whole regiment, and they failed. And then the following day, Ralph, with only about 15 guys, had captured the whole trench line, losing, I think, only Chip wounded, and there was 1 man killed, and everyone else came home, which is just remarkable when you think about what they were coming up against. They were outnumbered about 4-1, actually about 5-1. They inflicted about 20 casualties on the enemy, 20 killed or wounded, and it's just remarkable if you think about it. And also just harrowing to think about what Ralph and these guys were going through, because once again, you can see just by this depiction, the sketch from the time, it was not a pretty battle, and there's explosions happening all around. It's very dangerous. And to give you a bird's eye view on this, there's no better way than an actual bird's eye view. You can see this guy right here is he was an observer with the Royal Flying Corps, and he just so happened to be flying over Courcelette right at the moment that Ralph commenced that assault. And so you can see what he wrote in the letter back to his parents. I saw 1 man, a Canadian, I think, catch about 70 prisoners single-handed. I saw all the Germans huddled in their trench, and I saw our men advancing towards them. So he would have been watching Ralph. Then one of our men suddenly ran out and into the German trench. I expected to see him shot. No, all the Germans got out of their trench and followed him back to our lines, running as fast as they could. So it's just quite remarkable that to have all these different accounts. And once again, this is Ralph's mission. This is what he was assigned to do, and this is what he successfully carried out, or his men successfully carried out. The other thing to mention too is it did not end there. This is actually a post-action report by Ralph's company commander, and it's about 5 pages long, and it goes into all the different detail and what actually took part and so on and so forth. And you can actually see right here what was left of the 49th Battalion bombers of C section under Corporal Patterson. We're still holding on to one of the parts of the communication trench. So, and this is September 18th, I think. Yeah, because that's September 19th. So that's 3 days later. And so all that to be said, throughout that whole battle, it starts on the evening of September 15th, and it doesn't end till the evening of September 18th. So that's about 72 hours. Ralph Patterson is very much in the front line, leading from the front in that most dangerous role of bombing. So it's once again just remarkable. In recognition for kind of services, once the 49th Battalion got pulled out, the front line advanced a little bit. Initially, it was back there, if you remember, and then by the time they left, it got up there. They come back through the chalk pit, so on and so forth. They go back to the town of Albert, and once they're back there, this is just some of the casualties. Corporal Ralph Vernon Patterson of the bombing section was recommended and put forward to receive that military medal for bravery, and that's exactly what he received. And this is the official citation, and maybe not as much detail as I talked about, but this is the official words from his commanding officer, who at Courcelette, France, on the 16th of September, acting as NCO, so non-commissioned officer, in charge of a bombing section, in clearing a trench, handled his men with coolness, courage, and decisions. And pressed the attack until 50 of the enemy surrendered and 20 of the enemy had been killed or wounded. And what's so remarkable about this is that action, for us as kind of a regiment, if you will, is so important because Ralph led effectively a Victoria Cross action. So within a regiment, even to this day, the name Chip Kerr is still very well known because of of what happened that day in September 1916, and the outcome of that battle might have been much different if it wasn't for Ralph Patterson that day, leading his men forward, and once again that medal for bravery. It represents that action, if you will. So anyway, I won't get into too much of the detail. I think I've rambled on long enough about all that. But I just want to share with you guys a couple of things that might be of interest too. When I was retracing those steps a couple of years ago, one of the things that I found just looking on the ground was this German coin, and so it's quite remarkable to think that this German coin was there when the last German soldier was there. And it would have been there when Ralph actually passed through that trench, and it had just been being shifted around by the plows for about a century until that photo was taken. The other thing too is still to this day on the Western Front, there's a huge problem with these. They call it UXOs, unexploded ordnance, and you can see some examples here. You might be able to tell already, but these are the actual hand grenades that Ralph was using during that attack. And there's a good, well, maybe not a good chance, but there's a possibility that one of these hand grenades was actually being held or lobbed by Ralph during the battle, and it might have been a dud because many of the grenades and the ammunition, it wasn't waterproof, and so some of them, when they threw them over for whatever reason, it didn't blow up. But anyway, it's still a sign of the bombing attacks that happened at Courcelette, and once again, Ralph played a big role in them. So just kind of wrap things up here, and once again, I don't want to go on forever for this, but Ralph goes through a lot in the war. We only talked about the first two of the battles that he's going to go through, but you can see here, and this is just for future reference. So perhaps for you guys, if you want to do some more research on the different battles of the First World War, these are the actual ones he was directly involved in. And it's quite remarkable to think that he went through all that, and especially when you hear about the dangers of the Sanctuary Wood and Courcelette, that he came through without a scratch. In both cases, about half the battalion was wiped out. In other cases, such as at Passchendaele, 75% of the battalion is wiped out. And so you would think that by the end of it, eventually your number is going to be up. But in fact, what we see with Ralph, it's not the case. And he started out as just a meager private. By the end of the war, he's an officer. And not only that, but in fact, in 1918, he's designated as the bombing officer for the whole brigade. And so he's singled out not only with the Medal for Bravery, but he's also singled out with his ability and knowledge for the tactics about how to effectively clear trenches and so on and so forth, and a real fighting role that for the whole brigade. So for 4 battalions, he's seen as the expert. And so whenever they need extra support or specialties, so on and so forth, it's going to be Ralph coming in to fill that gap. And so he's going to play a real multifaceted role throughout the war, and once again, remarkably come through without a scratch. But I'm sure that there would have been some psychological changes by the end. Excuse me. Now to kind of start wrapping things up, sorry, my throat's kind of acting up here. I just wanted to talk a little bit because one of the photos that Martin, you had shared with me was this one, and I think you guys have a copy. I just want to help put it into context a little bit, and this is actually not Ralph's men, but what this is, it's a reunion photo. I talked earlier that a few of the guys that were still with the that had originally signed up with the unit were still there by the end of the war. And in fact, this is one of those photos where they got together all the survivors of number 9 platoon who had been through all the fighting in 1915, 1916, 1917, and eventually into 1918. They got this photo taken together. And I want to show you, it's kind of cool. Like if we go to, and I'm just going to pull up on Google Maps now, a lot of these places you can still see where they were. I'm just going to try and pull it up quite quickly. Where they were at that time, it was all the way in France, and they were just being billeted in a small town called, I'm just trying to see if I can find it. Here we go, Lierre. And so it's quite remarkable. If you look at this photo here, and once again, Martin, I think you have the original, you see all the brick wall and it's a square area. And we actually know where this photo was taken exactly. They were billeted in the small village of Fauconham. And then if they wanted to come over here to Lierre, there was actually, if you see where the mayor's office is now, that photo of Ralph was taken just back here. He would have gone through this courtyard, and you can still see the brick wall. And it's now a school. So you actually have all the French school kids there and everything. But that photo of Ralph and all his men and buddies and that sort of thing, it was just taken against that wall there, which is quite remarkable. There's another photograph that we have that you might have seen, you might have not seen. This is taken right at the end of the war. And similar, you can see all the different guys. And these are all guys that Ralph would have known quite well. And you can see Ralph just at the back. And similar with this photo, we know exactly where it was taken. And it actually hasn't changed at all. The only thing that's changed is there's a few more vines on the wall and the bench is gone. But it's quite remarkable. And this was taken at a place called Mons. So this is right at the end of the war. And once again, I'd mentioned earlier on, we could tell by that photo you had, Martin, earlier, this one. It's late war one because it's actually identical. It's the same one he's wearing in this photo in November 1918. So, and once again, I imagine this photo you might have seen, you might have not seen. But that's another one we have of Ralph actually overseas, which is quite incredible. The other thing I want to mention too, it's and thanks again, Martin, for sending these through. It's just remarkable. I have not seen these images before, especially about the pipe band. And this would have been taken just after kind of the militia period. The 49th Battalion stayed on, not as an active regiment, but it was more of a militia regiment. So it was still popular for some of the 49th Battalion officers who had served during the war, stay active, not only with the association, but actually as a military role. And you can see the pipe band, as you had mentioned. But the other thing I want to bring up is this guy right here, Ronnie Arthurs. And instantly I recognize him. He has quite a quite a distinctive face. And if we go all the way back to kind of the start of the presentation here, you can actually see we got Ronnie Arthurs right there. And so Ronnie was one of those guys that went all the way through and through. And in fact, I think Ronnie might have been one of the instructors. He got wounded during the Battle of Sanctuary. He got shot in the lung, if you can imagine. He laid out for about 48 hours before he got brought in. And then he ended up as an officer instructor. And I'm trying to remember, I can't remember totally off the top of my head, but I think that when Ralph went to England to go get his commission as an officer and go do the training, it was actually Ronnie who was one of the instructors. And so it's quite remarkable that all these years later, during the wedding, they had gone through so much together in the battalion, and you can see they're back side by side, if you will. So once again, just quite incredible. There's, as you guys know, and I won't get too much into the Second World War history. It's I'll be the first to say it's sort of out of my expertise, but he did serve in the Second World War. But importantly, he stayed active in the 49th Battalion Association, and it's not just through this photo that you guys can see here, but we can also see it later on. This photo was taken just after the Second World War, I think in 1948 or so only a few years before Ralph's death. And here you can see Ralph in the beret. You can see it's the French beret. This is his battalion or association beret. And he's speaking to some returned Second World War soldiers, just kind of sharing experiences, so on and so forth, at some of the reunion events. And this was actually photographed by a City of Edmonton photographer, and it might have been in a newspaper. I'm not totally sure. It's now held in the City of Edmonton archives, the original. But, quite remarkable. And then, of course, shortly thereafter, only a few years later, he sadly passes away, and fairly young, if I understand correctly. But and I'm sure you guys seen the obituary and so on and so forth. But it kind of goes into the detail, and then also this photograph of his grave, which is at the Municipal Cemetery in Edmonton. So anyway, all that to be said, this kind of concludes the short talk. And once again, it only touches the surface and really only discusses two of the many battles that he fought in during the First World War. But I hope it somewhat puts it all into context, or especially, I know, Martin, when you first sent that email, you were curious about what the military medal was for and the circumstances behind it. And really, I think it's quite remarkable if you think about all he went through. And I can't overstress this, but not only come through it alive, but also without a scratch. And not only that, he wasn't one of the guys in the transport of the service corps at the back. The bombers were often known as the suicide squads, just because they were so far in front. They were really the tip of the spear. And for Ralph not only to be serving with them throughout the war, but steadily be promoted into a position of not only seniority, but really being an expert within a much larger formation than just the 49th Battalion, but also encompassing the brigade. And within the brigade, I should also stress, not only is there kind of those elite units, such as the Princess Patricia's, but it also includes the Royal Canadian Regiment, which is perhaps one of the most distinguished regiments in Canadian history. These are the only professional soldiers in the whole Canadian Army in the First World War. And Ralph is seen as more experienced or a better expert at, with bombing and trench clearing than anyone in that elite regiment. So all that to be said, with the story of Ralph Patterson, it's such an important one, because when we look at the kind of legacy of the 49th, and especially with us, we like to think of these guys as not only soldiers but heroes, and I think it's quite clear that Ralph embodied that sense of heroism, not only in in the man he was, but also the actions that he did, and especially at Courcelette. So anyway, that's about it. And I promise I've rambled on for much too long here, and that more or less concludes the presentation here. So if it'd be okay with you guys, I'm gonna close it right now. Unless, was there any particular questions about the presentation or anything you guys want me to go back over or cover, or anything in particular like that?
No, for me, I don't think so. But I'd like to continue on with some emails and talk personally later on when you're when you have time, Joe. So yeah,
absolutely right. So, and I understand too that like with you guys never actually there's no one here who actually met Ralph or anything like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I think my dad did. You see him there when he was young.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And And does have you heard of anything in the family? Because one of the things I like to, at least when we do these talks, is and once again, this is going to be uploaded onto YouTube for future reference. So anyone who might be researching Ralph, they might come across this, whether it's family or whoever. But I'm also interested. Like, there's no family lore about Ralph or the sort of man he was. Was he a quiet man? Did he share anything about the war? Does anyone? Is there any information like that, or was it he didn't talk too much about the war or anything like that?
I come from a family that is associated with Ralph. And he was married to Leslie Gregory, her unmarried. And I think my mother and her husband probably knew him. I think they were at his wedding. Other than that, I think they I was only, I don't know, 10 years age, but just a kid. I had no idea what his military experience was. But those medals, in particular, those medals that changed. Lately, I was after Ralph died, and then I was executor of her room. She died long after his death. And that's how I came across the medals. I had to go through her belongings and decide what to do with them. And I came across these medals in an old suitcase, I think it was. So I hung on to them, and I didn't know what to do with them, so I just hung on to them. And Ralph had, to my knowledge, didn't have any relatives in Edmonton, or maybe even in his family in Ontario, because we never met any. My mother met him. She was a cousin to Leslie, Ralph's wife. Mm. My mother had contact with her quite a bit. And she didn't know a lot about him, but we never talked about him much.
Yeah. And he died quite young, right? Like he wasn't that old.
He was quite young when he died.
He was 58. Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard it was cancer that killed him, but I don't know for sure.
No, it was a heart attack, thrombosis. I have his death certificate. So,
yeah. So the family has got involved because some of this material is coming to light now that we didn't really know about. So I hope that the medals and the other material that pertains to his life is given to the regiment or the battalion for your safekeeping and for helping to enlighten his life.
Oh, that's so fantastically appreciated, and I'd expressed it too with Martin. You know, and it was kind of funny because I was a few years ago, I was even wondering, you know, where these medals ended up or something like that, because everyone was issued medals, not necessarily bravery medals. But then when I got Martin's email, for instance, and it wasn't just the medals, but also the photographs, incredible. And it's stuff that we don't even have in our regimental holdings, for instance. Some of the photographs, which was just phenomenal, right? So, but yeah, I can't thank you guys enough for reaching out in the first place. The other thing too, I want to mention, I don't know if it's of interest to any of you guys here, anyone listening, but we are hosting, and I think I might have briefly mentioned it to you, Martin, a battlefield tour next August, and the seats are basically just about full, but we do have a few spaces left if anyone's interested. And it's a special tour because it's an invite-only tour, and we're unveiling monuments. And the invite-only is only to descendants, much like you guys, who are part of the family of 49ers. And the big reason for doing this tour is we're unveiling monuments, both at Passchendaele, which is a battle he also fought at, but also at Courcelette in honor of that bombing raid that Chip Kerr got the Victoria Cross and that Ralph Patterson actually led. And so it's going to be a life-size statue of an advancing 49er. And it's only about 200 yards from the site. I was over there in France earlier this month. So we just secured the ground from the French mayor and everything like that. And what's quite exciting about the tour and is we actually have, and if I can just kind of pull it up here, I'm just going to pull up some group photos and share with you guys some of the people that are coming. So obviously, I think it's kind of safe to say that Ralph Patterson might have known this guy, if you can see it. And so one of his grandsons is coming on the battlefield tour. This guy's name is Red Skitch. And then we also have the family of Major Weaver. 3 of his relatives are coming. And then once again, you can see over here Ralph Patterson. And there's also the grandson of Chip Kerr, that gentleman who got the Victoria Cross. He's coming out from Port Moody. And once again, during that actual raid or that attack, this was one of the guys, the 15 guys that Ralph commanded. So I'm just throwing that out there. I can send you guys all that information later in a separate email. But all that to be said, it would be fantastic if 1 or 2 of your family can make it out and kind of representing Ralph's story. And we're going to be visiting all the different places that he fought because he was there from start to finish. Once going to be fantastic to have you guys as part of that 49er blood out there.
Well, it's interesting to hear about your plans. I don't know if anyone of us here that can attend something like that, but we'll probably discuss it anyways.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, right? Just in case, right? So, because the idea about the tour is it's something that actually hasn't been done since 1936. So that was the last time we got, it was families, but also the veterans themselves. And so now, of course, all the veterans are gone, but we're unveiling those monuments on behalf of that late generation. And if we can't bring them out there, we'll bring the families out there, and that's kind of the idea. So. But anyway, Martin, I've got your email, so I'll send all the information like that. But I think for you guys, in particular, your family, it would be quite valuable because once again, we're going to all the places that Ralph fought, and then and beyond that, a lot of the people that are going are descendants of guys that Ralph literally fought beside, not only in the same battalion or same company, but the same platoon, and his friends, which is just quite remarkable, right? So, yeah, but anyway, yeah. I don't want to keep you guys too much longer and stuff, but
I have a question.
yeah, but feel free, any questions at all, right? So
Well, at various times when I was trying to find out what to do with these medals, I thought of the Royal Enfield Regiment. They had offices in Edmonton, in downtown Edmonton. This brick building, I don't know if you know of it, you probably do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was in it once or twice for different reasons. But anyways, when I have moved in the last year from Edmonton to Calgary, and when I was going through stuff, I didn't know what to take with us and what to do. So I came across these medals again, and I thought, what am I going to do with these? So eventually, Martin's had some interest in this for a few years now, and a friend, and they did some research of their own at various times. And I sent him the medals and some other stuff, and I said, if you can figure out what to do with these, you just go ahead and do it. And that's why they ended up with you.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, no, once again, it was great to get Martin's email, and I'd already shared with Martin a bit of information, but in short, we at the regiment would love to have not only the medals, but also the ephemera that comes with it. It's all part of the story. The other thing too, which we're happy to offer is, if we have the originals, we're happy to share or make up some replicas so that you can still have a shadow box on the wall to share that story. So that's all possible. The thing I shared with Martin, I think it's important to share with kind of everyone here. There's two ways about going to bring it into the regiment, and so there's, as you had mentioned, and I don't know if I caught your name, sir. What was it? That would be the parent, father.
Ray. Martin's dad, Ray.
Yeah, Ray. Ray, as you'd mentioned, we have a regimental museum, the Prince of Wales Armory, and so it's been going on since the 1980s. And so as you saw in you might have been in, we have two big galleries. So one's the stone gallery and the other is a greaseball. And there's all the cases. We also have a storage facility downstairs, which is all museum and museum grade and so on and so forth. And so there's two ways about doing it, because I think the best place to bring it would be that regimental museum. But then if you if you donate it to the museum directly, the problem which might happen, it wouldn't be in the near future, but potentially down the road, is, and it's standard museum practice, that if the museum does shut down for whatever reason, then and then they have full authority to do whatever they want with it. And a personal moral problem I have with that is, if you read the paperwork, the family, so you guys would never be consulted with it. And so as I shared with Martin, and once again, this is just in different particular examples, but they've been, the artifacts such as medals or whatever, they've been transferred to different institutions. So maybe the Royal Alberta Museum, where they'll never see the light again. And so I'd mentioned with Martin on the email that an important thing with, I think, keeping Ralph's memory alive, if that's kind of what we're aiming for, there might not be a regimental museum in 100 years, let's say, but if that's the case, it's best for it to go back to the family. And for that to be possible, the best way is to go through our association. And there's something called the 49th Battalion Memorial Collection. And so to have Ralph's stuff as part of that memorial collection, there's about 100 other 49th Battalion medals in that collection. And it'll be stored at the museum on a permanent ongoing loan. And then equally, it can be used in exhibits, brought out to the regiment, so on and so forth. The family has access to it at all times. So if you guys ever want it back, there's no surrendering of the property of it. And it's something I've done with many other families in the past, just so that you guys stay involved with it. If there's any time that someone in the family wants them back, that's always possible. You don't surrender it. And it's that might be the best way. And so I propose that to Martin, but of course, whatever you guys do, it's totally your decision. We can either do the regular donation to the museum, which would be greatly appreciated, but equally, I think, and this is just from the bottom of my heart, the best way is to do it through that the memorial collection, just to keep you guys involved. And so in case something might happen, once again, it wouldn't be in the next couple of years, but in the future, you guys can retain partial ownership of your family history as well.
Where is your museum located, physically located?
It's in the same brick building you had mentioned. And this is the other thing why it's good to have it there. The Prince of Wales Armory. And so it's just near Rogers Place, so where the Edmonton Oilers play. But it's a historic building because it was built just before the First World War. And in fact, when Ralph came back at the end of the war, that's the same building he got his discharge in. And so later on, when he was part of the Edmonton Regiment in the interwar period, that's where he paraded out of as well. So Ralph's story with the 49th, it's also quite connected with that. And the museum itself is open Monday to Friday, 10 to 4 p.m., 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And if you guys ever want to come down, and once again, I'd mentioned it to Martin, but I'd be more than welcome to welcome you guys. And we could, in addition to visiting the museum and doing a full tour, we could also do a sort of physical battlefield tour in Edmonton. So we'll go to all the actual places that Ralph actually trained during those early months. We'll go visit the actual building he signed up. He was sworn into the service with the Canadian Army, and you'll just see it in a different lens, the city of Edmonton. So
It's good.
Okay, well, when we drove past the armory, it looked good. It was all fenced in around there. There wasn't
Couldn't find our way in.
it's tough now. You got to go through a residential street, But if you get if you're on Google Maps, that's the best way. Because basically what they did, they put the LRT, the new train in,
Right.
and it cut off 2 of the roads to get in there, right? So yeah. And it's funny because if you visit, we've got photographs of the building itself from different time periods, and this includes kind of from the pre-war period when it was just all open farm fields until even the 1930s. And there's a photograph of them doing a parade in the main drill hall. And it's possible Ralph might actually be in that photo. It's too grainy to see, but yeah, it's changed a lot. And then it's only in kind of fairly recent years that it's really difficult to get in there now. But if you've got the Google Maps, that's the best way to figure out how to get in there. But there's basically a side road you have to take.
We found a gated community.
Gated community. Oh, so that's a bit different. Might have been the wrong armory too. Yeah, you might have been going to a real military base.
Yeah, anyways, now I know about it. I didn't know if you were still there or moved to some other location.
No, we're still there, but it's quite it's a good location because just down and only a couple blocks away. So it's on 105th Street and 108th Avenue, and then if you go to 105th Street and 100th Avenue, it's a much smaller armory. Now I think it's called the Land Title Registration Building, but it's only 8 blocks away, and that's actually where Ralph's war started. So that's where he signed up. So it's quite amazing. Just down that one street, you get so much history for Ralph and his war.
Okay, well,
Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Right. So, is there any other questions, guys? Well, you have me, and I'm always available too. So if any follow up or anything like that, and same to anyone who might be tuning in or listening later on, if you have any questions, you can always fire me an email.
you're located in Edmonton, is that right?
Yeah, I live in Edmonton, and then the other thing too, and kind of a lot of the photos you might have noticed that were actually taken recently in France, and so I'm in Edmonton kind of in the winter months, and then during the summer months I'm a private battlefield tour guide on the Western Front, and so my primary job is actually leading, I guess, families much like yourselves and in the footsteps of their relatives, just bringing it all to life. So it's kind of a neat little mix. And then when I'm here in the winter, it's I do the history for the Loyal Eddies.
Okay, so
Awesome.
to take in, but
Very good. Thank you
I
very
don't know if
much.
anybody else has questions.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure, everyone. Right. So, and thanks again, Martin, for reaching out the first go. And once again, so exciting the all the things you were sending through, the photographs, and just outstanding. And I'm sure many of you guys imagine Ray, for instance, when you found them in the suitcase or wherever you did with the photographs and the medals. It must have been quite eye-opening and shocking for you as well. It's like, oh, amazing that this is still there.
Well, I'm just glad that it finally ended up in somebody's hands that can look after it.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic, right? So anyway, thanks so much for considering us as the old battalion or the regiment, if you will. Yeah, so it's much appreciated. So, because as I mentioned too, like 2 years ago, once again we were sharing Ralph's story, and so it'd be awesome if there's a lot of new troops, and so with this we can keep that memory alive by actually, instead of just having a photograph of Ralph, now they can hold something tangible, whether it's his medals or see the other photographs of him and so on and so forth, and that's really what matters, is making sure that their memory doesn't die, right? So, yeah. Awesome. Anyway, guys, I imagine that's it for the questions. So I want to thank you all for coming in again and tuning in tonight. And I just want to make sure no more questions. Hey, it's all good.
Well, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
thanks, Joe. I was just going to say that there's probably some more pictures you might be interested in. You're talking about the last time they were visited was in 1936, and I guess that was the opening of the Vimy Memorial.
Yeah.
We have a picture of Ralph and his wife in the garden of Buckingham Palace during that visit.
Seriously, so he was on the Vimy pilgrimage?
He was, yeah, and the picture of them on the ship coming back from their
Oh,
Vimy.
That's well. That's okay. This is even more
Yeah.
incredible because there are only like from our regiment, we only had and he didn't show up on the list. He must have been signed up as 7th Brigade bomber or something like that. Because there were only we only had 26 guys who actually went on that because it was a Great Depression out of about 3,000.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, really. So that's just unreal. So exciting, hey? So. Yeah, because he actually what was amazing is he went on a course to become an officer, and once again I didn't really talk much about the Battle of Vimy Ridge, but basically when he's coming back to be an officer, the Battle of Vimy Ridge is in full blow, and so he actually joins the unit in what's known as the Grange Tunnel, and he joins with another guy whose interview I captured when I was in Ottawa, and so I can send that over to you so you can actually listen to what it was like. A guy named Kenny Kinnaird. And when they got there, it was just this crazy thing because we talk about Battle of Vimy Ridge and so on and so forth, and he's just seeing the tail end, but he was there at Vimy as well back in 1917, which is once again incredible. So anyway, but yeah, Martin, if you any of those other photos that you might find, if you could keep sending them through, and then I'm sure we'll be in touch with maybe if you want to come to Edmonton, or as mentioned, we can make it work or something. I could probably even come out to Victoria if it's preferable for you. And then once again with the medals, if you guys want replicas made in the shadow box, that's more than possible. So,
all right, yeah, I'm it's quite easy for me to make that to Edmonton, so you and I could sort of just coordinate and find a convenient time for both of us. And
that'd be awesome. And thanks again so much for reaching out. Again, it's always so exciting every time I get a new email from you and the amazing photographs, right? So it's just brilliant. So anyway, thank you guys so much once again for tuning in. It's awesome so many of you guys were able to join, and I hope you guys learned something new. And once again, thank you. I guess I can't thank Ralph for his service, so I'll thank you guys for your family service in the Great War. It's really a remarkable story. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Joe. That was really good presentation. Really informative, enjoyable.
My pleasure, right? So yeah, and I'll shoot you over the link for the YouTube, so anyone else who might be interested.
Okay.
So
that sounds great.
Awesome. You guys take it easy. Have a great night from BC and Calgary. So yeah, if ever you guys are in Edmonton, just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to give you guys a VIP tour of the museum. You're always more than welcome. So
that's great.
Awesome.
Hey, thanks, Joe.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.